I'm very, very delighted to be here with a very illustrious panel. Rita, Badri, Indran, and Paramita, welcome. Welcome and thank you for being here today to talk about multilingualism and, as the title of the session says, in many tongues. So can we, just begin where each one of you reflects on which language feels like home to you when you write, and has this changed or shifted over the years? Rita, would you like to start, and then we can go down?
Yeah, it's a question one could expect, and yet it's an answer that I always find difficult to. I grew up with Sindhi in my home, and I think some of the most formative ways of seeing the world were shaped by that language. In that sense, that language is home. But I think मेरी यारी दोस्ती हमेशा हिंदी उर्दू के साथ हुई है. And then I married a Gujarati. I grew up in Gujarat. So when I'm in Delhi, for instance, somebody speaks Gujarati, that feels like home. So maybe except English, all these other languages are home. It's not as if I think of English as an alien language, but I don't think वो नाभि तक कभी नहीं पहुंची. It is not a language that has percolated every fiber of my being. But all these other languages are home. And very often home is an experience that takes place with reference to something. So when someone else speaks Hindi in an environment where nobody else is doing, then that feels like home. So I think it shifts a little bit for me, Swati.
Badri?
See, actually, I'm born in Bhojpuri area, so my mother tongue is Bhojpuri. So I think in a Bhojpuri and I write in Hindi or English. So you can understand my struggle, because at every level I lose. Because when I experience the things in Bhojpuri, if it would have been better if I would be able to write in Bhojpuri, but Bhojpuri in that way I can't write, because when we couldn't acquire capability to write Bhojpuri. So Bhojpuri is a oral language, not in a written script, not in a written language. They write in Devanagari. But when I write in Hindi, I realize that I am losing many aspects of my experience, which I get from my everyday life or from the field. Because people always in the villages, they speak in the rural language, in the folk language. But we as a writer, we write in Hindi or English. When I go write in English, again another double lose. First Bhojpuri to Hindi, for Hindi to English. But every language provides you a space for create some kind of creative structure. So you are losing, but also you are gaining. Gaining in terms of evolving a new creativity. But it depends on your imaginative mind, means the imaginative mind of the person, how creatively he is engaging with the language in which he is writing, the experience which he collected or got from the other language. So that's my view.
Indran?
Thank you so much. I was born in a country that no longer exists. It was called Ceylon when I was born. Now it's Sri Lanka. So then I sort of got used to this idea of disappearance and through migration. I had a very lucky encounter with A.K. Ramanujan, who called my first book, he said, a welcome addition to the poetry of migration. So that's the territory where I operate. And I've migrated to different languages, to Spanish, to French, to Haitian Creole, to Portuguese, as it's spoken in Brazil. And I've made my home in each of these languages. I feel at home in each language. I feel at home by writing in the language, by loving in the language, by eating in the language. And somehow these new homes have replaced or have given me comfort for losing that original home, which is Tamil. So for me, home is a language. And I have one language, a mother tongue, that has disappeared or is blocked somehow I think related to various traumas in the departure from the island. I remember when I arrived in London in school, the first day of school, a teacher asked me a question in English and I replied in Tamil and I felt ashamed. I didn't understand. She didn't understand me. I didn't know why I responded in Tamil. Perhaps that, and then there were some other incidents in Sri Lanka. Unfortunately, the Sri Lanka is a bloody island, a beautiful island, a bloodied up paradise with a lot of trauma for different reasons. And so the language also is a political choice in Sri Lanka. During many periods, one had to keep Tamil under the carpet, in a sense. You read the Tamil newspaper, and then if somebody comes, you hide it. So this is the sort of the secret language for me, I suppose, as Tamil, and I constantly I'm in search of that, recovering that secret language, but I have not yet done so. Yeah.
Thank you. For me, probably it's very simple. I'm a die-hard Odia. I had started writing in Odia from the beginning. I have been inspired by the geography, the nuances, the rich heritage of Odia literature, and the folklores, folk tales. And yes, as a child, I had been access to a big library which my father had. My mother is a very eminent poet of the country, got Padma Shri this year. So, as Indran said, I eat, drink, and dream in Odia. Fiction and poetry, I have been writing in Odia, and I originally think about writing in Odia only. Slowly, as time passed, I entered into the age of English and Hindi through my profession. I belong to the Indian Revenue Service, as you all know. So slowly and through translation, I have entered into the other languages, and some of the non-fiction like articles and my professional articles and literary articles I wrote in English, been published. But I always, now also, yes, in a multilingual state as we are now, sometimes words come into me in Hindi and English also. I mean, it's not that it's always in Odia, and I transform them in Odia in my mind, but sometimes the other way around also. But as far as fiction and poetry, I do write in Odia. Thank you.
Indran, you work across 5 languages, and I presume none of them is Tamil, from what I understand you say. Do different languages call forth different voices when you're writing in them?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I've been thinking about it. During the civil war in Sri Lanka, which I call Uncivil War in a book, I wrote in English certain poems because I wanted to send them to Sri Lanka and for them to be read by Sri Lankans directly, because of course English is one of the Sri Lankan languages. So I chose English very deliberately to write these poems about the suffering of the war and the bombings, the civilian deaths, the various things that happened during the war. And I've noticed that in writing about political matters in English, I tend to write in English, meaning, and I publish them in, for example, in the United States, there's a website called the New Verse News, where you publish poems about contemporary issues, and I find I'm writing those in English. But in Spanish, perhaps I'm freer, perhaps it's lighter somehow, and I can write about more intimate, personal matters, matters of the heart. All poems are either poems of love or poems of war or poems of exile or poems about your relationship with the divine. All these big themes that you can write in any language. There is a language of love that you can find in English. But I think the Romance languages, French, Spanish, and so on, are the music, the love music falls easier somehow, and I try to capture it. And now, of course, when I'm writing outside of English, I'm using a vocabulary from 20th century and more recent writing. I'm not versed in the classics in Spanish, for example, in the way that other native-born Spanish writers are. And so, whereas in English, perhaps I can go back to Shakespeare or Chaucer, and so, just because of more years. In Spanish, for example, I'm 26 years old. In English, I'm rather older. So, but I broke the sound barrier, so to speak, for me. I crossed the border. And perhaps the fact that I was born in one country that no longer exists, that I was taken to another country that was the imperial master and so on, but then became, so the complicated relationship with England, and then going to the United States. So I've been crossing borders all my life. So it didn't terrify me to cross the linguistic border and write outside of English and feel at home, because the response is positive. You know, people are welcoming, and they enjoy the fact that you've chosen to write in their language, and they make you feel at home. And that's how I felt, for example, in Haiti, writing in Creole, which along with French are the two main languages of the country. So yeah, I do feel at home. Sorry, I hope I'm responding to your question. Thank you.
Of course. Rita, you have referred to translation as a political act. Could you tell us something about the power dynamics that come into play? For example, in terms of which text is chosen to be translated, who are the authors chosen to be translated, and the languages that they are going to be translated into. So if you could very quickly give us an insight.
So Swati, I want to talk of translation of text, but I also want to talk of translation on an everyday basis. And I think in that context, I also want to say here that, you know, we use words like celebration of multilingualism, like the note about this panel also said, celebration of multilingualism. But languages also jostle with each other. They also fight with each other, they contest with each other, they seek our attention in very particular ways and so forth. So for instance, when I'm actually translating something from Gujarati, I'm sort of aware that Gujarat's official discourse defines Gujarat in a particular way, right? As a state or a society that is occupied by mercantile, upper caste, trader, urban people, but it will not take account of the 14% of its Muslims, of the 13% of its tribals, or of its Dalits and so forth. So how I decide to engage with a particular text in Gujarati is very often shaped by what is that other Gujarat I want people to notice. And in that process, I may do a very non-canonical Dalit writer, but I may also do a very canonical mainstream writer, so that we are able to see where is that thinking coming from, what actually forms that particular canon. So these are things that I'm sort of acutely aware of when I'm engaging with it. Where Sindhi is concerned, for instance, I recently translated the first woman writer of Sindh. Now, she does not figure in any archive that we know of. Susi Tharu, K. Lalita, no history of women's writing in India, nothing. And she wrote not only was she the first writer, she wrote a novel about Hindu-Muslim romance in the run-up to partition in Sindh, and every encyclopedic entry about her in Sindhi language will simply say, Guli Sadarangani Jai Ittihad Likhyo, and that it was controversial. But it does not tell us where is this novel, who's Guli, the fact that she needs to be celebrated. So I translated her. So what happens is that translation is sometimes an act of discovery, but very often also an act of recovery. Sometimes you do it with one language, sometimes you do it with another, or you you choose particularly a dialect because you also want to push against certain kind of shushtu bhasha, right? A sadhu bhasha, which everybody thinks is mainstream. So I think every act is riven by it. But that is not to say that you're not drawn to what people may say, if we are to separate the literary and the political, it is not to say that you will take a highly badly written work. You will also sort of think whether there is some power to something here. So these are decisions that translations sometimes may do unconsciously, but some of us do it quite consciously. Like I translated a book which is called Agni Pariksha, which is about the riots that took place in Ahmedabad in 1969. And they have been more formative than 2002. In fact, it was actually the 69 riots that paved the path for 2002. But nobody writes about it. And so this is somebody who actually wrote that book after 2002 to say, look, this is not new. It had already happened before, right? So these are decisions I may make, and you may say, oh, these are political acts. But really speaking, I think there is a certain degree of politics to almost everything, every choice one makes.
That's so true. Badri, how does writing in two languages, two or more languages, shape your approach towards specific narratives, for example, Dalit narratives? Are there things that one language allows you to express that another does not? And would you like to say something about this?
See, I think this question combined two different kind of responses. One is the kind of Hindi which we write, because I write poetry in Hindi. Is basically, we have two type of Hindi. One is Klisht Hindi, other is Samanya Hindi. In our day, there were two magazines used to publish in Hindi. Kadambini used to use very Klisht Hindi. And then the Sarika and other magazines, they used to write very common Hindi. So our struggle is, as a poet or as a writer, to write a language the way Tulsi wrote. No? Is Panchmail Khichdi, which combines Bhojpuri, Awardee, Braj, and various, and Kabir, because Kabir is being sung in various folk dialects. They used to bring their words in that. So Hindi provides you a space to use this folk, but it depends on the poet or the writer how he is going to negotiate with this multilinguality of Indian society, which is kos par boli badle do kos par pani. Every kos our boli has been changed. About Dalit narrative, actually most of Dalits speaks in their experiences in their own folk dialects. Mostly Bhojpuri, Awardee, Braj and all. But when as a scholar we used to write, we write in Hindi, their experiences in Hindi and in English. So it's very difficult sometimes to get translated their experience, words, metaphors, in which they express their feelings. So it's a big struggle, creative struggle, to how to use, to explore appropriate language to tell the Dalit experience, because their experience may be truly is not right word, is about correctly may be presented in the folk. And as I say that we don't have capacity to write in the folk. So to write exact Dalit narrative or very deep Dalit narrative, you need to write in the folk. But you know, this is the limitations of our education system, because that's why mother tongue is very important. Mother tongue provides you capability to write in that language. But when I write in Hindi, what's different between Hindi and English? When I write in Hindi I can say more than the English, because English creates another kind of limitations. But English provides us some terms, some vocabulary and dictions which we don't have in Hindi. That may be, there may be a danger of being in trap of certain stereotypical narrative, like social exclusion, like this, like that. It's a very easy to express the experience in those words. But in Hindi, but in Bhojpuri, they may have different kind of diction. As I said, if you go and ask to the people in the villages, do you know democracy? Jantantra shabd suna hai? Jantantra, no one knows Jantantra, democracy. But they know Ijjat, they know Barabari. So if you want to denote democracy in their language, then you have to talk about Barabari and the Ijjat. So there are various kinds of diction, they have their own. Indian people have their own diction, but we as a writer, when we write in a certain given dictions which come to us through the English. So English is a power, but also English is a limitation. Hindi in that way provides you more space to include their words in the language, and I think that is the strength of Hindi.
Paramita, you just told us that you think in Odia and you write in Odia, and sometimes there are words of English and Hindi that also creep in. But could you tell us a bit more about the writing process, and how do you navigate the multilinguality that you have in your everyday life? How do you navigate that in your writing specifically?
Like Badri, I also write fiction and poetry in Odia, as you say, as I told you. I can just twist your question a little bit. See, when nowadays, or for quite some time, some certain things also I think in Hindi, and because I'm exposed to Hindi literature more. I have friends who write in Hindi, speak about it, Awardee, Bhojpuri, everything I'm listening. So those things also make an impact on me. But when it comes to writing in Odia, as I told you that, those kind of imagery, kind of nuances, kind of symbols, which I use, even if this country being so cohesive in the culture of different people and languages is so difficult to, modulate into other languages. I just want to give you one example. It's about a poem of mine. The title of the poem is Bohu. Bohu, everybody understands, daughter-in-law. In this, the mother-in-law is talking to a friend of hers that my daughter-in-law has committed suicide by hanging herself from the fan. Look at her, how shameless, all full naked, and she's slinging like a Raja Doli. So Raja Doli is a typical Odia word. Raja is a very important festival of Odisha, which symbolizes fecundity and fertility of the soil. And around that time, girls of puberty and newly married girls are being celebrated, and the the mother-in-laws and mothers, they do all the household chores. So you can make a little comparison with Sawan Ka Jhula, but still then it's not like Sawan Ka Jhula. It's something very different. So those kind of hurdles I always come across when I want to express myself in my language, and when it goes to the other language, even if it is not English and even if it is any of the Indian languages. But still I enjoy using the imagery and symbols. As Badri said, he draws them from Awardee, Bhojpuri, and all. I draw those from my own language. I find it very seamless to write in my language, and though sometimes the imagery comes from something else, and at this age we have been reading so much of books in Hindi, English and all, but when it comes to thinking and then putting it in paper, I still prefer the imagery. And I believe that somewhere somebody asked me, it can be universal. What is universal? All the feelings are, and the bhav behind the things are always universal. It doesn't have to be a place or nuance or a kind of a language that you write in. So this is what I think. So.
There's a question now that I would like each one of you to weigh in on, and it's a question related to globalization and English dominance. So in such, technology, we're living in the age of AI, and there's tech dominance, there's English dominance. What role do you think multilingual writing and translation can play at such a time in preserving linguistic diversity and traditions? So, Indran, maybe we could start with you, and then Rita, Badri, and Paramita.
I remember I once wrote a poem in Creole, Haitian Creole, suggesting that Haitian Creole should be one of the United Nations languages, along with English and Chinese and so on. So it's all about, yeah, there is this dominion, I suppose, of English and with AI, and so the resistance is writing in the languages you know, and promoting the study of multiple languages as part of the basic school curriculum. We don't want monolingual education. We don't want monolingual thought. You know, we want the to promote the diversity, biological diversity, linguistic diversity, conserve this variety that we are bequeathed as when we are born onto this planet. And so, yes, I'm very much for breaking down some of these assumptions. I think that there is no harm in having a text published. I mean, for example, when I edit the journal, we like to publish the poem in the original language, followed by an English translation. We assume our main readers are reading in English, but we want the readers to see the original language. And I promote bilingual books and poetry. And I think we want to empower our readers. So if you have the two languages, let's say, of the poem, the reader who knows both languages can evaluate for himself or herself the translation as well. It's a kind of a ongoing education for the translator as well. So I think we need to promote diversity, linguistic diversity, and just encourage our children to study, to cross their own borderlines, you know, and not to be afraid of eating the food of the other culture, including the metaphors of the other culture. Yeah.
You know, it's quite paradoxical. You could put an entire text through AI in Gujarati, and it'll give you a fairly competent translation. I mean, of course, the text has to be of a particular kind. There's no scope of Sindhi at all at the moment, neither in Google Translate nor in AI. So it's a pretty minority language in that sense. But when I now look at a lot of young students, I look at Instagram posts, I feel there is far more interest I see in younger people in knowing about their Sindhi history than I have ever seen before. I mean, I have been working on these things now for 30 years, but I see a lot more interest. So, Swati, my answer to your question is that it is a bit paradoxical. That in the sense that some of our skills have been rendered irrelevant. And I think it is chastising and humbling for people to know that we are slightly irrelevant now. But in some other sphere, I think we hear far more talk about multilingualism. I mean, let's also understand who was talking about multilingualism earlier. In fact, even words like bahubhashiyata, हमारे ज़बान पे बैठता भी नहीं है ठीक से. It's so self-conscious. There was a certain kind of organic way in which there were people who were situated in life. I mean, Indran, I think, is one example, who were situated in life in such a way that if they came from a language you had to leave behind, or you came from a minority language like Sindhi or Tudu, you will learn the majoritarian language of the state, and you became multilingual without even thinking that you were doing anything special. Now suddenly it feels like some kind of capital. It feels like some kind of a special thing to wear it on your sleeve. On the other hand, there are technologies that are actually making it easier, and also sometimes, as I said, hollowing out some of your role. So I don't think there is a simple answer to that question. I think there are formations here which are pretty complex and which seem to be doing different things, because after all, the internet or the digital space is not one kind of homogeneous space. Yeah.
I think this is the reality of the world, because English dominance is everywhere. And, but you know, maybe a larger part of the world is still living without English and without dollar. Many African countries, no, they use their own language. And China, Japan, no, many countries, they have their own language, and they are writing science, literature, everything in their own language. So dominance is there, but dominance is mostly in the countries who were the colonized. But the countries who were not colonized, they have evolved their own language. And the limited use of technology sometimes helps your own language to grow. Like Hindi, no? Hindi, when I used to write Hindi by pen, no? Pen and kagaz. So I used to write, then I used to give through my typist. Typist takes 1 day or 2 days in typing, then used to send me. Now I can write in on my mobile, no? And I send to the newspapers or to the publisher. So limited use of technology sometimes empowers your language. But overuse of technology will erase or dilute some of your skills and also creativity, imagination. Like AI debate is coming, how we are going to engage with the AI, and whether AI is going to help us or not. So, but most of the time what happens when any technology comes, we become very afraid, no? Because scared, because it will harm us, but after some time we realize, no, it is helping. Like when computer came, when PCO came, many people were afraid, oh, PCO aa gaya, wo kya hoga? Computer came, naukri chali jayegi. फिर AI, the kind of AI came, still that kind of worry is there in our society. But let's see how we are growing to. But as Hindi writer, I observe limited use of technology is helpful, not overuse of technology.
Well, I agree with the paradox and with the advantage. We do come to know about many things because of globalization and yes, transformation of many of the work into English, informativities. But still, you see, Swati, how many books are being published in all the Indian languages? Yesterday, Badri and I were talking in Gujarati, in Odia, in Hindi, Bengali, books are being published, people are reading, and mostly, yes, we know that the younger mass are not reading the Indian languages, and more they are reading in...
They're not reading English also.
So if they read, they can read any of this, and also can take help of the technology. So I don't think, technology is there to enable us. That is what it is about.
Thank you. Are there any questions, please? If you can please raise your hands.
Can I just intervene one small thing before we do that? I think I do want to sort of put it out there कि कई बार हम एक भाषा जो समझते हैं वो एक में भी अनेकता होती है और कई बार जो हमको अनेक भाषाएं दिखती हैं वो उसकी फितरत एक ही होती है. And I think this is we tend to think multilingualism is discrete languages put together. But what we don't understand is that, for instance, the so-called Hindi of the Bollywood song has Awardee and Braj and words from other languages. When I was translating Joseph Makwan's Angadiya, the Dalit novel, which is in Charotari, someone said to me, Rita, tell Joseph Bhai to write it in Gujarati first. So what I'm trying to say is we also need to take account of the fact that there are languages that bleed into each other and they are completely mutually comprehensible. And then there are those that seem like one homogeneous language, but they have actually many other languages in it.
So true, absolutely. The lady here, and then the gentleman there in the white t-shirt.
Okay, so hi, I'm Avni, and my question is to all of you that when you choose a novel for translation, how do you decide whether the novel needs translation or adaptation? Because some things may be relevant in the region where that language is used, but it may not be relevant in our language.
Shall we take a bunch of questions? Thank you. The gentleman there in the white shirt.
Hello, yeah. So my question is to Rita. You've written in Sindhi, and so Sindhi has this. So you've talked about translating old works in Sindhi, and I think an issue you would face there is that the setting that they're set in won't apply anymore in a way. So modern readers of Sindhi won't get to see sort of the same connection with the Indus River or the landscape that Sindh was in. So how do you sort of manage to translate that in a way that the reader can still get the same emotions or feelings that the writer then was trying to convey?
The lady with the bangles.
Hi. So something that I've noticed whenever we read translated work, in languages that I don't know the original of, let's say I'm reading translated Bengali or French, we wonder how the original could have been. But when I read a work in Hindi and then they translate it in English, it feels like everything has been lost in translation. So as translators, since you can't ever be totally objective, do you make it a rule to be loyal to the original text, to your intended target audience, or to the past structure of which language is more global, or whatever your internal metrics are?
So shall we take these three questions?
Yeah, they all seem to be about translation. Okay, all right, I'll respond, and if anyone else wants to weigh in some sense, all three questions tie up. You know, I don't like to use words like loyalty or faithfulness. They are very servile words. But I will say this, that if you are translating and something has a locale, a geography, a space that is so distant from your time, in some sense, not only are you translating for the reader, you're also translating that for yourself, right? So as a Sindhi, post-partition Sindhi, when I'm reading about Hyderabad or Sakhar or Ladkano or Mohenjo-daro, even I have a chasm to fill before I do it for the reader. And sometimes you feel a huge twinge in your heart because you're not able to go to those places. It feels like a painful sort of an act. But what you also try to do in whichever way you can is that I constantly have a conversation with my friends in Pakistan where I try to understand what I'm not able to access. I talk to them, similarly to answer the questions that the two of you asked. If the writer is living, you also are in conversation with the writer and say, Joseph bhai, this is what I understand, and do you think this captures what you wanted to do? I think to kind of have a blanket statement and say that all translation is about loss is not a very fair statement to make, because really if we were to see translation as rewriting, as in a certain act of creative writing, translation is that third, an independent entity. It is not meant to be Angan by Khadija Mastoor as you read it in Hindi, but I'm sure Daisy Rockwell, when she's translating that from Hindi into English, then she's making sure that you are given a text by Khadija Mastoor. If you are able to read it in Hindi only to learn that it has been lost, and don't read it in English. Why are you even going to the English translation? It's meant for people who can't read it in Hindi, right? So a certain kind of an exercise which is there is defeat written into that exercise. A detective exercise by which you take the original, you take the translation, and you say, see, it is not good. I don't understand why that exercise is being undertaken in the first place. You are meant to trust the credentials of a translator who has come with a certain experience. उनको उनकी गरिमा दो, उनकी dignity दो. हर बार उन पे शक की नज़र से देखते हुए ये मत सोचो उसने ठीक से किया है कि नहीं किया है. जिंदगी बिताई है यार ये सब करते करते. So I think I find it a little bothersome when people constantly raise these questions, almost as if translators are these unruly people whom we cannot trust, and let's find out where did they screw up. You might want to approach a text with a degree of trust in the credentials of the writer and translator. कुछ सोच समझ के एक दूसरे से बात की होगी, साझा बांधा होगा, that this text has to be translated by this person.
One last question. Yes.
Hello. My question is, how does trauma memory, or how do these concepts of trauma memory and migration affect one's language? And if they do so, how would that be reflected in literary works? Thank you.
How does trauma and the effects of trauma and migration affect your language? Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we play with this notion of a universal response to suffering, whether it's you respond in whatever language you respond in. You're trying to capture something that is human, that is shared by all members of this species. But also, you wonder about animal suffering. What is the suffering of the elephant that's knocked down by the train that we allowed to run at an excessive velocity? So you try to understand, be empathetic, and try to capture. I'll tell you a story. When I was a boy, an elephant charged our jeep. We felt we were about to die. And then in the jeep, there was a person who spoke some language of elephants and screamed this language out, and the elephant stopped its charge. So if we can capture that language that stopped that charge. So the translator is a brave person, is a hero, but it's also a corruptible person. So we do have we can trust but verify, you know. So you have, it's an ongoing relationship with the translator, and to the extent that you develop your own knowledge of the original language, I don't see any harm in playing and looking at but I agree that that should not be the purpose. Let the translator do the work, but you also do your own work in appreciating how the translator has captured the original language into the language you're reading it in. And I don't see any harm in you evaluating the work, you know, looking at the two languages back and forth. Anyway, trauma needs to be de-traumatized. And the way to de-traumatize is to write and to translate and to make words from that suffering. And whether you make those words in whichever language you make them in, go ahead and make words from that suffering.
We're completely out of time, but absolute final word from Badri.
I think this questions which you raised has a multiple answer. The one answer which is given by him. Other answer is it's very difficult to de-traumatize the memories. And you have to negotiate with the various location through your memories. Memories work as an instrument. Through that you negotiate, and that creates a kind of hybridity. Hybridity is not without locus, without nis. Nis is your memory, because I have researched in various parts of the world on the migrants, and I found that they are very much, on the one hand, they are very deeply rooted in their language, which they left, and on the other hand, they are very good in appropriating the new languages. Like Surinamese, those who migrated from Bhojpuri region. They have evolved their new language that is called Surinamese. It's a kind of hybrid of the Latin American language, their language, and also Bhojpuri language. So everyone is migrant, and migrant are very good in adjusting with the given situation, especially in terms of language, culture, with maintaining their own niche. So that trauma is a power. Trauma is not a kind of, it's their strength, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Paramita, Indran, Badri, Rita, for this wonderful session. Thank you all.